Now let's look at loops. So loops are used to repeat or loop over something based on some type of criteria. To be honest, most of the time I use for loops in R, but while loops are also useful. We're going to start with while loops, and then we'll look at for loops after that. Okay, so here is an example of a while loop. So basically, while loops are executed until a condition is no longer true, right? So basically, I'm starting off with a value of 100. So this is basically a scalar or like a vector with one value in it. So what I'm saying here is while x1 is greater than 90, do this. So basically, it's just going to print x1, and then once it's done printing it, it's going to subtract 1 from it, and then it will go back into the loop and reassess the condition, right? So here's kind of a logical like step through this. So x1 is 100, x1 is greater than 90, so execute the loop. Print 100, then subtract 1 from 100 to get 99. Then 99 goes into the loop, so 99 is greater than 90, so true, so go back into the loop. So print 99, subtract 1 from it, get 98. 98 goes back into the loop. 98 is greater than 90, so that's true, and it goes back through it again. And eventually when it gets to 91 will get thrown in. Yes, that's greater than, yes, that's right. 91 is greater than 90, so true. Print 91, subtract -1 from it, and then throw 90 in the loop, and now we have 90 is greater than 90, false, and then the while loop stops. So basically you're going to loop until the x1 reaches 90, and it's going to count down through each iteration of the loop because you're subtracting 1 from it in each iteration, right? Just as another quick side note here, I use equals. Again, you can use equals for variable assignment, but you could also have done this, and that would have been fine too. Alright, so if I run this, what I should get printed out is all the values down to 91, and then it stops, right? One thing you got to be careful with within a while loop is you could theoretically have what's known as an infinite loop. So for example, if I added 1 each time, then it's just going to get bigger, so the value is always going to be above 90, and it'll just continue to run indefinitely until it's runs out of memory or the user halts it or something. So you got to be careful you don't have an infinite loop. They're pretty easy. Or another option is I could have done greater than or less than here. Actually, in that case, it wouldn't execute anything in the loop, right? Because 100 is not less than 90, so then it would just stop, right? So you just need to make sure your logic makes sense. Okay, so that's a while loop. Another couple of side notes. This could all be ran together if you want. R's pretty forgiving about spaces and indentation. So let me just get this back to the way it was, so that would still run. Okay, cool. Okay, so a for loop, again, is like a while loop in that you're looping over something. But instead of having some condition, generally what you're doing is you're looping over all the elements in an iterable object. So like every value in a vector, every column in a data frame, every row in a data frame, every row in a matrix, something like that, right? Okay, so let's have a look at how these work. So now we have a list of, or a vector of countries. So we have 5 countries there. So that's a vector, x. And then we're going to be basically saying for I in x, print, I would like to go to, and then I, and then period. Okay, so what's going on here? So let's break this down. So first off, paste is used to concatenate text. So let me just show you an example of that before we actually run this. So let's say we had like x is equal to hello, and then y is equal to me, I don't know. And then we'll do z is equal to period. So what paste does is it basically acts as a concatenate. So you do paste, and then we could just do X, Y, Z, and that'll return back hello me period. Now by default, paste will put in a space between each of the object, or each of the objects that are being concatenated. There's also paste 0, which doesn't do that, so it would run everything together, and then you'd have to specify the separation or the space. You could also do something like this. You could do you could just add blank spaces into the list there. Alright, so that's what that's doing. It's basically just concatenating text. The only other thing we have here is this concept I. So I is basically a variable, and it's just a stand-in for the current iteration, right? So like if this is, so for I and X, basically I would be at position 1, so Australia in the first loop, and then it turns into 2, and then 3 and 4, and then 5. One thing that people tend to get confused with is that there's nothing special about it. That's just a commonly used term because it's like the iteration I, but you can use another term. We'll look at that in a minute. So let's just run this. So if we run this, what gets printed back here is I would like to visit, and then the country, or sorry, I would like to go to, and then the country, and then the period there. Again, this doesn't have to be I, so if I would put like country here. Now if I ran this, it's not going to work. It's just Cuba each time, and that's because I wasn't updated. It was the last iteration of the prior one, so it was the last one, Cuba. So make sure these match. So if I put country here, I also have to put country here, right? So they match. So in short, there's nothing special about I. You can use the different variable name here. You just have to make sure it matches as you work your way through the loop. Okay, actually, this was showing that same example, which I forgot. But anyway, again, I'm just replaced it with country here to get as a replacement for I. Okay, so this is just an example of one reason why loops can be really useful. So this is going to be useful when you need to do something repetitively over like a set of files or a set of values in a vector or whatnot. Okay, so let me show you, actually, yeah, I guess that works. I'm just going to change this to something else. So I have this folder on my D drive, elevation data out. So let's have a look at that. Oh, sorry, this should actually be elevation data. Let me pull this up over here. So anyway, I've got a folder in here, elevation data, actually. Oh, you know what? I didn't update this, I don't think. Actually, I can't run this. Sorry, I don't have this data on my computer. So anyway, I'll just talk through it. Sorry, this is from a different computer. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm reading in raster grids from a folder that end in this IMG extension. And then I'm specifying an output folder. So basically what it's doing is it's iterating over each of the files, reading the file in, then performing an operation on the file, and then reading it out. So you can see how that could be really useful. So let's say you had a table with like a bunch of like CSV files in it, and you needed to like read each one, do a search for certain types of records like a filter, and then return the records and meet your filter, right? So instead of having to like do each of those separately, you could create a list of all the CSV files. Then inside of a for loop, you could read each one in, do the operations that you want, save the output that you want, and just iterate through all of them until you're done. So, a few lines of code could theoretically work over, thousands or tens of thousands files for you manually, so you don't have to do it like individually.